The McDonnell-Douglas DC-10 is an icon of civil aviation, as one of the very first wide-body aircraft to enter airline service. It first flew in 1970, and over 300 DC-10s were built by the time production ended in the 1980s. Unfortunately for aviation enthusiasts though, the DC-10 is steadily being retired around the world. It flew its final passenger flight in 2014, though it still lives on in a limited role with a few different operators. Here in Canada, there were a few passenger airlines who flew DC-10s like Wardair and Canadian Airlines International, but otherwise, passenger DC-10s haven't been flown by Canadian Airlines for decades. However, some might not know that there was actually one Canadian operator who flew the DC-10 as recently as 2018. This is the story of the Kelowna Flightcraft DC-10 fleet. Kelowna Flightcraft, or KF Aerospace as they're now known, is a Canadian aerospace company that's headquartered in Kelowna, British Columbia. They originally started up as a small aircraft maintenance company in the 1970s, later expanding into some charter flying. In 1977, KF began flying overnight cargo flights for Purolator Courier, beginning what KF describes as their longest-running customer relationship. Throughout the 1980s, KF continued to expand the fleet, adding two 727-100s to be used for flights with Purolator. The 727 fleet steadily grew throughout the 1990s, with KF becoming Purolator's dedicated air cargo carrier in 1994. Eventually, in 2008, KF secured a major contract with Canada Post, Canada's primary postal operator, worth over $100 million. Up to that point, Canada Post had been using belly cargo capacity on passenger aircraft to fly mail across the country. At the time, Canada Post owned 92% of Purolator, and Canada Post felt that they would be able to benefit from using their own network instead. For the lucrative Canada Post contract, KF looked at wide-body aircraft like the L-1011 and 747 before deciding on the DC-10. With lower capital costs compared to other newer aircraft, its 160,000-pound payload capability, and KF's prior experience with maintaining older aircraft, the DC-10 was deemed to be the right choice. The only catch was that KF had just a few months to buy the aircraft, certify them, train people, and get this wide-body operation going. The first two DC-10-30 freighters, which KF registered as Charlie Golf Kilo Foxtrot Alpha and Kilo Foxtrot Bravo, were first built for British Caledonian and were delivered to KF in September of 2008. They started operations later that month, flying mail and cargo for Canada Post across the country from Hamilton to Winnipeg, Calgary, Vancouver, and back to Hamilton. Soon enough, KF added two more DC-10s to the fleet, Kilo Foxtrot Delta and Kilo Foxtrot Tango. These two planes started their life with Lufthansa in 1975 and were registered in Canada in 2010 and 2012 respectively. Like the first two DC-10s, these were soon flying mail across Canada with a 99% dispatch reliability, according to KF. Unfortunately for KF though, after 6 years of flying the DC-10s for them, Canada Post and Purolator decided not to renew their contract with KF in 2014, awarding their domestic air cargo contract to competitor Cargojet instead. Reportedly, Canada Post wanted lower costs, higher reliability, and more flexibility as e-commerce began to rise and volumes of mail dropped in the early 2010s. With that blow to KF, it seemed as though the DC-10's days were numbered, and the contract was officially handed over to Cargojet on April 1st of 2015. Later on that spring, the first two DC-10s were removed from the Canadian register, and sadly scrapped in Hamilton in August 2015 and June 2016 respectively. However, Kelowna Flightcraft wasn't quite done with cargo flying just yet. In early 2015, they announced plans to rebrand as KF Aerospace, launching a new network of cargo flights from Toronto to Europe and from Vancouver to Alaska. This included a move to Toronto's Pearson Airport with the two remaining DC-10s and two 727s, where they would fly between Toronto and Brussels, and Toronto and Moncton. The plan was to capitalize on markets like seafood and pharmaceuticals, flying one of each aircraft type while keeping the other as a spare. KF also had plans to expand these cargo flights to Western Canada and Alaska, with flights to Vancouver, Calgary, and Anchorage. KF also did a few international charter flights throughout this period, including some destinations in Russia, Argentina, Spain, Germany, and even Iraq. Those western routes, though, didn't exactly materialize, as the transatlantic cargo market proved to be a tough one for KF. Less than a year later, in March 2016, KF ended the cargo operation out of Toronto, saying that it wasn't economically viable and that there was too much belly freight capacity in the North Atlantic market that they were serving. Both DC-10s were ferried back to Hamilton, while KF looked for other options for them, including potentially selling the aircraft. Despite this though, the DC-10s got yet another lifeline. Just a month later, in April of 2016, it was announced that KF had secured a contract with Solar Cargo of Venezuela. The DC-10s would fly from Miami to South American destinations, flying flowers and fresh produce. Initially, they were operating 3 flights a week between Miami and Bogota, Colombia, and another 3 flights a week from Miami to Caracas, Venezuela, and onward to Lima, Peru. The DC-10s continued to fly these routes out of Miami until they were finally retired from KF in 2018. As Canada's very last DC-10s, Kilo Foxtrot Delta and Kilo Foxtrot Tango were officially removed from the Canadian Register on September 14, 2018, and exported to the United States. As of 2020, both aircraft are stored at Kansas City International Airport in Missouri, and with them now being over 46 years old, it seems doubtful that they'll fly again. KF Aerospace, though, is still very much around today, as Canada's largest maintenance, repair, and overhaul company. In 2014, with the drawdown of their cargo flying ahead, they began to refocus their efforts on their maintenance operations in Kelowna and Hamilton, which have steadily grown since. KF's largest customer at the moment is WestJet, and KF supports their Dash 8 and 737 fleets, along with the 737s at Swoop. In addition to WestJet, KF has also provided maintenance for airlines like Sunwing, Air North, Air Transat, and even some international customers like Icelandair and Condor. Although it's easy to boil down KF's history to just their cargo flying work, I'd be doing them a disservice if I didn't at least mention their other ventures along the way, like their Convair Stretch program, Greyhound Air, their Canadian Forces training program in Manitoba, and many others. Also, KF is actually the type certificate holder for the Convair 240 family of aircraft, which includes the CV340, 440, 580, and more. Even as their remaining trijets were retired, KF Aerospace still kept flying some feeder flights, and to this day, they continue to operate some Convairs for Purolator throughout British Columbia. Though it's not nearly the same size of operation as it once was, it is a testament to KF's ability to diversify their business. And on a personal note, the KF DC-10s were always the favorite part of young Alex's plane spotting trips to the Calgary airport, and I'm really glad I saw them as many times as I did. In the end, while the DC-10s may have been old, they did do their job and truly helped KF Aerospace spread their wings beyond Canada's airspace. Thank you so much for watching, and to my good friend Brandon for the Convair footage, and I will see you all next time.